Hey guys, Blake here. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how I made this simple crosscut sled. So sit back, relax and enjoy. Alrighty, so I've just glued up the support rails for the crosscut sled. They're currently drying. In the meanwhile, I'm going to be making the runner tracks that run between the T-slots to allow the sled to not wiggle around and actually work as a sled. And I can't make this up, but I just quickly had a look on the wood rack and I just found the perfect piece of very nice looking hardwood. It's got an absolutely beautiful, very tight grain. I'm not too sure where it came from, but I can't make this up. It is the perfect length to match the width of the sled, as well as running it through the T-track. It fits perfectly and there's no side to side movement. It is perfect. So I'm very happy with that. It saves me a lot of work. So I am going to cut some slots out that are just a little bit prouder than the T-track height to allow for the sled to run smoothly without frictioning along the bed of the table saw. And that is just about 11 millimeters, give or take. So I'm going to cut those strips down and then we'll work on gluing it to the actual sled bottom. Okay, so I've just cut the runners and they are a perfect fit. There is maybe just a hair amount of wiggle room, so that way they can easily slide, which is perfect. The only issue is my table gets in the way, so I'll have to route out some slots. But that's okay, we can do that later. Now, the trickiest part of making a crosscut sled would be probably attaching these so that way they are perfect and slide nicely. And the easiest way to do that is to have the tracks in the T-tracks, have your fence set so that way it's pretty much perfectly centered, and just using the fence, use that to then go down and push tight. Now, the easiest way we're going to be using to attach these is just using some super glue. Over in America they call it CA glue. CA glue and super glue might be a little bit different, but it's the same thing. Now the one issue here is the slots are pretty much perfectly flush with the actual table. So that's not an issue overall, because once the slots are attached to the base plate of the crosscut sled, it'll sit flush anyway and it'll be fine. The issue that comes is when we're trying to attach these. So the best way to do that is actually just get some little washers and put them just down the bottom of the T-track on both sides. Make sure the washers are all the same size, that way you don't run into any issues. Then pop them in, and then now you can see that there is plenty of room above the actual table saw, just to make our lives easier when it comes to gluing the board on top. So once those are in there, you can get your super glue and some wood glue. Here we go. So I've got my wood glue ready and I've got the super glue ready to go. Now, make sure you've decided which side's the bottom. And then what you do is add down just a little bit of glue. You don't want to add too much, but then leave a little bit of room in the middle and the ends. That way we can pop down a little bit of super glue. And the super glue will just allow the tracks to adhere to the plate just a bit quicker. That way you don't have to wait here for the wood glue. Now, make sure that this is ready to go. This is brand new super glue. There you go, make sure not to get it on your fingers. Now, add a big drop there. Nice big drop. Good drop. And yeah, the super glue dries quite quickly, so I'm going to try to work a bit fast. Now, once you got your super glue and your regular wood glue, try to make sure that the slots are even. And then, using the fence to help guide you, place down the plate on top, and push down nice and evenly. Might be worth just getting something to help weigh it down. Oh, I've got to use my big old toolbox. And then, just let that sit there for, you can probably let it just sit there for 2 minutes, but I'm going to be extra safe and just leave it there for maybe 5 or so minutes. Now hopefully the super glue has adhered to the plywood. I'm really hoping this works. I might cry if it doesn't. But here we go, moment of truth. I'm quite worried. I'll do this side first. Oh yeah, that's looking good. Alright, then very carefully take that out. I'm going to rotate that around. Now, there we go. So the tracks have been attached and they are perfectly parallel and in line with the T-slots on the table saw. Okay, so the sled is dried nicely and it is a great fit and it slides very nicely. So the next step would be to just sand the bottom of this ply nice and smooth because it's still very rough and just hasn't been sanded at all yet. So I'll sand this down and I'll use a bit of wax. Ideally, you'd use some paste wax, some stuff for actual timber. But I've got this block of surf wax or skate wax, which I use for woodworking all the time. So I'll rub that on after I've sanded it and then see how she slides. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so it's been a while. I've actually kind of lost track of time, but these ply rails should hopefully be glued to each other. There we go. That's perfect. So I got myself 2 rails. Now I'm just going to chuck a few screws in, just a couple, just to make sure that these are definitely stuck together and we won't have any issues. But otherwise, these will come either end of the sled, and I made sure that the height of this rail is taller than the max height of the blade, so that way, you know, the blade doesn't come out the top and just cut it in half. So yeah, make sure that you've done that if you're making a sled. So I'm going to clean up these, but before that, I'm going to drill a couple screws in. Okay, so I have screwed these together, sanded them nicely and rounded over the edges, so they are ready to go. Now, in order to attach them, we'll just use screws and some glue. Now, this back rail won't matter too much whether it's perfectly square, because you won't be actually resting any material against it, so this one doesn't matter too much. So this one I'll just easily screw and glue in, and I will do that right now. Now, like I've said, it doesn't matter too much if this back fence isn't perfectly square, because we won't be leaning any material on it. But this one here is the important one. This one you definitely want to make sure is nice and square, and I'm going to show you how you can do that quite easily. What we're going to have to do is make the most exciting cut, which is basically right through the center and just leaving a little bit at the end, maybe 4 or 5 centimeters, about 2 inches. So that way it's still in one piece. So there we go. We made the first cut. Now I made sure not to go all the way through the board, as you can see, leaving a little bit, and that's going to allow us to place the final fence in, and then it'll be all done. And the easiest way to make sure this fence is perfectly square with the blade is to pop one screw in one corner and then rotate it so it's perfectly square. Okay, so now that one screw is in, we can still easily rotate this, which is perfect. Now I'm going to grab a square. I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah, that's looking great. Okay, so now that that's clamped in place, we'll chuck down the other 3 screws and we'll make sure that is perfect. Make sure that all the screws are sunk a little bit below the surface of the plywood, that way they're not scratching against the table. But after all that, the sled is pretty much perfect. Now I won't bother gluing the front rail, simply because if later down the line the sled does go slightly out of square, I can undo it and put a new fence in and make sure that's perfectly square. But yeah, just with screws, it's not going anywhere. And that feels pretty perfect. There we go. Just finished building a beautiful crosscut sled. And so it really is that easy. Now it's not a tricky process, it's just a matter of making sure things are square and in line, but otherwise, that's perfect. Let's make a few test cuts. There we go. Works a treat. It's that easy. Thank you all for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.